I have the privilege this morning of introducing my friend Cece. She and I met somewhere in the last century, which I couldn't quite determine when in the last century, but I know that she really popped up in my consciousness when I heard that she was had created a clearness committee to help her in her work in Burundi and Rwanda. She wanted to go and work with these folks that had been. Oh, we've got an echo somewhere. I think thank you. So at that time, it didn't compute with what I knew about Cece. Cece seemed to me to be very quiet and unassuming and thoughtful and smart. And I thought, Burundi? She's got to go to Burundi. So over the years, what I've found out about Cece is that she's not only all those things, but she's also got a great sense of humor, which pops out in the most unusual ways, and has continued her work all these years with very troubled situations in Colombia and Cuba and lots of places. So today we've asked her to talk about moral injury. And and I've got to say, she's also been very involved with AVP, which has been great. So, and I see that we have some folks here that are not usually here. We will welcome you. If you'll just say your name if you choose to speak, and if you could raise your hand and wave at me or raise a white piece of paper, that'd be great. That'd be helpful. Thank you all. Okay, so Cece.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And I think this yearly meeting, and especially St. Pete, who helped me years ago raise money to go to Rwanda and Burundi. We had a big yard sale in the meeting house. I mean, that has been ongoing support from the yearly meeting. And I really appreciate it. I see also Margie Arnoldi, who's been a close friend through all this, and Christina Bellamy, who helped me work on the book that I wrote on moral injury. So, and there's others too that aren't here. So I'm very much in appreciation of this yearly meeting. How many people know what moral injury is? If you can just raise your hand. Okay. So this is a concept that was developed, I think, actually at the beginning of the Afghanistan war. But people were, psychiatrists with Walter Reed and other army hospitals were starting to see more and more people coming in who weren't, it wasn't PTSD, but it was something related to that. And they coined the definition of moral injury as a deep transgression of feelings of shame, grief, meaningless, and remorse, and having violated moral beliefs. And we know that people in war, this is often the case, but I don't know that people had reported it as much as they did after the Afghanistan war. And when I heard about this from Lynn Newsom with Quaker House, and she came and did a presentation, and I was like, that's what I've been seeing. That's what I've been seeing on these trips overseas, and also in my private practice. For a while, I had a contract with Military One, and I would see soldiers who'd been in combat, and they were so disturbed by what they had seen or participated in. It was really disturbing to see what they had been through and hear about it. in person. And I also, as Susan was saying, in my trips to Rwanda and Burundi, heard from people who well, basically killed other people and been part of that, and their deep regrets and difficulty moving on. They did put people in prison after the genocide in Rwanda, but there were many people who were not incarcerated, and the prison wasn't really a prison. So we incorporated people into our workshops, not just people who had been what people might call victims, but also people who'd been soldiers. And many of these people were young people, probably had no idea what they were doing, but they got caught up in the genocide or the war. So the AVP, which Alternatives to Violence, which Susan mentioned, has the opinion that all people deserve a chance. All people deserve a chance for healing. All people deserve a way out of the past. And people who have had moral injury or experiencing, they definitely, it's not going to be as visible to people. It's something they're hiding usually. They're usually hiding what they've done. They're usually afraid to talk about what they've done because some of it has been horrible and they realize it. So it really affects their conscience, and they start to feel like they're no good, they're bad. And then because of that, they start continuing that behavior sometimes. Did anybody see the movie American Sniper? Anybody? Yeah, that has a lot of scenes where the main character is reacting out of moral injury. You can see, especially one of the things this is killing somebody that was not endangering you, and finding out about that later. Killing the wrong person. I know we think killing for anybody is terrible, but especially think of that. That's killing a child who you think is against you. I mean, this kind of really rips your soul. So, and people, I had a contract for a while with Military One where I was seeing people individually, and they would talk about some of the things they had seen, which I won't go into. So I knew there was a need out there. I wasn't sure how to address that. So fortunately, this concept of moral injury has blossomed, and there's a lot of people working on it, especially Quaker House. So I developed this book that Quaker House is now selling, and you can get it on Amazon. Actually, it turned out to be a bestseller. I don't know how, but anyway, it is. And it has some really practical information. And Christina was one of the people, one of many who helped me with writing it up. And so I want to talk to you about, do you guys have those slides, Susan?
Vicki, do you have the slides that I sent over to you? I don't know if I can share them or not.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you about them real quick. Okay, so it's not an officially recognized diagnosis, but it's not PTSD, but it often comes along with PTSD. Both moral injury and PTSD affect people with depression, insomnia, nightmares. Moral injury also affects people with shame, alienation, regret, sorrow. PTSD has a different effect on people: startling, memory loss, fear, flashbacks. That's PTSD, and some people have both. So people are affected by seeing things they can't forget. And they're also affected if they couldn't intervene in a situation to help one of their fellow soldiers, or if they couldn't intervene to help a civilian. And I remember one person was extremely upset that he had misguided a group of trucks inadvertently into an ambush. He was very horrified about that. So those are the kinds of mistakes that people can make in combat that affect them deeply. If they saw somebody that was injured and they couldn't help them, that also affected them. If they had somebody shot nearby, that affected them. Or if you did see that movie, American Sniper, there's a scene where the protagonist, they're up on a top of a roof and they're walking through some laundry, and his good buddy walks out first and he's shot instead of him. And I think that really happened in real life. So there's all these crazy things going on that they have no control over, but yet the people will take it on themselves. And you can imagine how that eats up a person when they come back. Any questions right now before I go on? Okay, so some of the things, some of the tasks that a person can do, and a lot of people are treated through the VA or through places like Walter Reed, but not everybody has that opportunity. So I developed this for therapists that were seeing military people. So one of the first things is helping them understand about moral injury so they don't feel crazy. So people say they feel like they're crazy when they come back. They're not making heads or tails of anything. They're feeling a lot of remorse, but they're also feeling a lot of anger, being put into situations where there was nothing they could do, or being out in a remote area where they were doing nothing. And I can only imagine what the military in Afghanistan are feeling right now as they're closing that down. They must be, beside themselves and seeing what's happening and being helpless. So, but understanding how that this is moral injury, they're not, they're having a normal response to an abnormal situation. So part of it is giving them some general information. And I might stop here that this was also important when we were in Burundi and Rwanda, helping people understand. We had ex-combatants and people from the community in the same trauma healing groups and helping them understand what had happened. And many of them got to realize how they've been kind of hoodwinked or brought into these combat situations by the leaders, and now they were seeing what really was going on. And we see this, Christina was talking about at Coleman working with the men's unit. There were a number of men in there who had been former military. And we also did kind of in the cycle of violence, looking at how they had been hoodwinked in some situations to be in that situation. Is that making sense to people? They got some distance from it and they heard other people saying the same kinds of things. So I think that was really helpful. And we worked on positive affirmations from themselves and talking about positive things they did. So that's one of the things. The other thing, or the next thing is looking at their spiritual health. And there's many ways to do that. We did some journal writing. Some people in this group I know have done journal writing, and there's lots of different ways to do journal writing, like as a dialogue or just a recording of your thoughts. So that's one method we used. Also, before you start doing any kind of trauma work, it's important to build in some moral and spiritual resources. And we do that also in our trauma healing groups with Friends Peace teams too. We're building a lot of community before we start diving deeper. So we can help try to help people reconnect with those resources. They could make a list of people that have been spiritual resources for them, maybe try to reconnect with them. Again, there's that feeling like I'm not good enough to do that. So we're kind of encouraging them to go ahead. And we ask them, what helped you feel close to that person? What are some things that that person did? And finding people, even if that person isn't available, that can also do that. We also, have you ever heard of an empty chair exercise? Okay, so we set up an empty chair, and we ask, well, in the workshops, this is how we do it. I'll show you real quick. We're in a circle and we stand, like if I was sitting here, I would stand behind where I was sitting and have a spiritual resource talk to them. For instance, I might say, I'm Cecilia's grandmother, and I saw her when she was little, and I could see that she could handle things in such an adult way, and that she had a way of bringing the other kids in her neighborhood together. And then we would have the person sit down and take that in. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. So we did that as a group, and everybody got to hear those affirmations, and the participants got to feel the heavy positive of that. That's one exercise. We also developed something called the River of Life, which Christina was part of at the prison. And we have people do a drawing of their life in the past, present, and future. And then we walk people through that. And we have them write in some of the resources at each of those stages of life, and personal resources and people they know, and activities that they did. So we're trying to move them along. Does that make sense? We want them to get out of sitting, feeling like there's nothing they can do, and see that they've made some progress in their life, and now there's this other thing out ahead of them. And they bring in who those resources would be, and then we have them do a little sociodrama with those people, and they talk to them as if they were that person in their life. Are you following me? Okay. Did you have a question, Marjorie? No. Okay. Okay. Let me tell you, the men in the prison picked it up so quickly. Christina and I were like, wow. They were doubling for her. By doubling, they were able to even say some things about herself, because they knew her, that they had seen in her, and bring that out too. And then we had them do that for each other in small groups, since we didn't have enough facilitators, which was also empowering for them to be the leaders there. As much as we can in AVP, we want the people to be the leaders. This was just a training opportunity. So that was, has been a very powerful, and then the future self talks to the present self and helps them figure out what are they gonna do to make it there. Okay, got that. Okay.
Cece?
Yeah.
Cece?
Yeah.
I think the story about how it became a river as opposed to a line is really beautiful in terms of ecology and the environment and your own bioregion, and make it culturally relevant.
Yeah, good thank you, Christina, because that was in Rwanda where that happened. And I said a line and they said, no, it's a river. So it became a river, and that's how we've kept it at that. We always like input from people to make it more culturally relevant as much as possible. We did a lot of journal exercising, and again, talking back and forth with somebody that we're writing about in our journal. And then we have them in another chair and they talk back to us. Is that making sense to people? It's hard to do it on Zoom. I think a really big part of this is helping people see what happened, what they said they did. With a little more objectivity, let's say that. And one exercise we use from ADP is listening in fours. And we have the person talk, and other people, we meet in small groups, and they, one person tries to remember what was said, another person listens for feelings and values, and another person might listen to what morals they're hearing and what they're saying. And so then when the person finishes talking, the four people that have been listening, one at a time, feed back to them what they heard them say. And many times they're able to kind of fill in the blanks for the person. Let's say, for example, the man who, this didn't happen, but I'm using that as an example, the man who was talking about sending the people in the wrong direction. If that, they might say something, I heard you say that, and it sounded like you were very much concerned about them. You had a high concern for them, and you valued their safety very much. And that was really strong in what you said, and helped them connect again with their intentions, even if it didn't work out the way they wanted to. So those were the kind of feedback, and it seemed to help people to hear that feedback from other people, that there were good intentions in what they did, for example. So that's an example of what might happen. Then we get to forgiveness. And for this, we invented the forgiving spirit, and a talk with the forgiving spirit. And we chose that, and sometimes people want something different, so that's fine. But we chose that kind of, that spirit that they could keep with them. This was something they could carry with them, this forgiving spirit. And we did some work before that on what does forgiveness mean to you? How do you think of when you have been forgiven, or think when you have forgiven somebody else? And so they do some writing about that. But then in the forgiving spirit, we put them in one chair, and then they develop their forgiving spirit in another chair, and they have conversations back and forth with the forgiving spirit. Is that making sense to you guys? So it's very powerful in person to for people to realize they have that within them, that they can feel that within them, and they can use that in times of feeling guilty, and we want them to accept there were things they might have done differently, but be able to forgive themselves that maybe they weren't able to do that at the time, and be able to take that as accept that. And that's sometimes hard for people to do. So we call it a forgiving spirit. And a lot of people, this is interesting, a lot of people use one of their grandparents as a forgiving spirit. That seems to have enough distance. And remember, a lot of people, for grandparents, that was a very warm person, not always. So they can choose whoever they want, but it's helpful to have that warm engagement with whoever. It could have been your best friend, your best buddy, your dad, your mom, sister, whoever you want it to be. Then the next part is making amends. Some way that they can make amends for what they believe they did. Some way that they can give back. And it's interesting. At the time I was writing this, I was doing some traveling, and I would be in a line at remember when we used to ride on planes? So, and we'd be talking, and often there'd be a veteran there who would talk about something that they were working on, like, oh, and I would tell them what I was doing, and they would say, oh, well, we're working on a riding program with horses for veterans, or we're working on a way they can distribute food. They had all these ideas that they were doing. And that's a way that they can, felt they could make amends for what they saw as transgressions that they made. And a number of them said they didn't like people saying thank you for their service. They said, okay, you don't know what I did. That's not, they don't usually say that to people, but we were talking about this in a conversation. So ways to help them make amends, and there's lots of ways that people have found to do that. They can make a plan. And if you saw American Sniper, you saw that the fellow who, the main character, tried to do a program where he was helping people who'd been in the military. Now, unfortunately, that did not work out well for him in real life, but it was an example of that. So another, probably the last one here is healing rituals, and rituals that people can do within their own religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, and they can use whatever they want, but some people work with their priest or minister or spiritual advisor. So this is a way they can continue that. Now, here's something congregations can do. I've talked with people up in Delaware who have a interfaith group of different religions who are supportive of these folks who've been in these situations. And they have groups where they can share. They also do a lot of activities, and they do a lot of these making amends types of activities as well. Thomas Davis, I believe is his name. And he had been, I think he used to go to Wilmington Friends meeting. So there's those kind of things. The same thing is true in Burundi and Rwanda. People who are ex-combatants have come back, and they're working with the folks in their neighborhoods on building gardens, caring for goats, doing different activities for their community, and trying to give back in the ways they can, and sharing that war was not the, people had this idea that war, being in the service, would be just a walk in the woods, and they would show them what had happened to them and how they had been treated as well. One fellow who had sunglasses on the whole time, we're in a dark room having this workshop, and he said, "You want to see what happened to me?" And he took off his sunglasses, and he was blind in one eye. And people in the room didn't realize what had happened to him. So there was a lot of discussion how war hurts everyone. It hurts the people and it hurts the combatants. They're all marred by it. And they had started planning things that they could do together. They had a monthly group that they they called it a community group. So, and kind of reuniting people. And I think that is a really important, that it's just not one workshop. There's an ongoing thing. There was another group of women who cared for goats together from the different sides. So now I want to open it up for any questions that you have.
Cece, could you share any expressive arts kind of activities that you did, and what that turned out to be and what that meant for the participants?
The expressive arts, especially that River of Life, was expressive arts. I probably have one around here, but I won't go get it right now. But that was very easy. I would call the role-playing expressive arts, because they acted different parts. And they sometimes, I remember a fellow, this was in Colombia, wanted to get married, have a farm. And so when we did the drama for him, there were people playing goats and cows and his wife to be. Now, the nice thing about doing it that way with people from your community is that they can support you even after the workshop. And they often had follow-up meetings too. So playing that part like I was your cow, it sounds funny, but it brings them into the to the action with you, makes you part of their future. So that was a way we did that. People did, I think people did some other artwork too on their own. It wasn't necessarily a task for this. Other questions? Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of activities that you did to move them through this, through this journey. And of course, there are activities that I would do happily. But I'm wondering if you had intellectual about what is. Did you?
I didn't quite understand you.
I'm sorry. Did you have conversation about what is? Help that's what they were dealing with.
I'm sorry, I still couldn't hear what you.
I'm sorry.
Can you type it in the chat?
Sure.
Cece, this is Susan Wade. Did you see this as an application outside the military and prison arenas?
Oh yeah. I did a workshop for a psychodrama group, and they took to it right away. Everybody, let's say it this way, everybody has done things they hate that they did. I don't know anybody who hasn't done that, had some experience where they regret what they did, they feel bad about it, and they feel like I'm a bad person because of that. So yes, we did some workshops with professionals and with, these were people that were at the conference. So it could be done with individuals that just come together. I haven't had requests to do that, but it could be done. Let me see what Susan said here.
I haven't finished.
Okay. Oh, you haven't finished? Oh,
My name is Teresa Ritz. I do a lot
Okay.
of work with people with substance abuse disorders,
right.
and I have used some materials from your book, which Christina graciously shared
Oh.
with me. And, many of them have moral injury.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's been very applicable in that realm. And I appreciate the work that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we all carry some moral injury of something. I'm not going to share it with you now, but I can think of some things I've gone, oh gosh. Wish I hadn't done that. We all have that experience, but I think you're right, especially with people with who've had substance abuse issues, or they probably have had some experiences they wish they hadn't had. And I think it would be really helpful for them. I don't know how many of the, I don't think it was a big problem in some of the countries that we worked at, because they probably didn't have as much access as they do in the United States. But we also worked with young soldiers in Colombia who'd been with the FARC, and they had kind of been indoctrinated. Okay, they had kind of been indoctrinated and into their side. Let me just say, there's one exercise that I didn't write down. It's who am I? Has anybody done that with AVP, where you have different roles you've played, and so you go through them and decide which ones you're putting aside, which ones you want to keep. And this young man, after we were done, came up to Val Live Oak and I and said, my life will be forever changed because I saw that I didn't have to be who I was before. And I thought, well, so I think that could happen with a lot of people, to see that you can, these roles that you have done, these activities, that doesn't have to be part of you anymore. You can put that aside. And Susan is telling me we don't have much time, right, Susan? Okay. So we only have 5 minutes. Any last question before we close with some silent worship?
Yes, Cece.
Yeah.
How widely recognized amongst the military psychologists, or psychologists in general, how widely recognized is moral injury?
I think now it's widely known. There's a lot of work at Walter Reed that they're doing. I don't know how widely they've dispersed their research. They're still working on it, but that's very widely accepted, their work. I have a book called Adaptive Disclosure that was, Brett Litz is one of the forward thinking on this and doing a lot of research. This is like in the beginning stages of PTSD right now, as far as moral injury. We're still working on developing the concepts and things that work. There's probably a lot more to be gained and learned, and a lot more applications. But this is a great book if you wanted to look at. Also has a lot of ideas and exercises for those who are interested. Just Google it, my gosh. There's tons of material out there. So, but I realized now that I was seeing this a long time before I knew what I was seeing. So it's been, this has been around for years. Was there another hand up?
Yeah, George.
Yeah, George. You're muted, unfortunately. Can you unmute yourself? Okay, good.
Okay. I think what a lot of these guys really need is someone who is on their side and says, yeah, you went through a lot of things of various degrees, and let's work together and move forward together. They need a partner who is forgiving and solidly on their side, and that's really helpful.
It is really helpful to have somebody on your side who will listen to you and not be judgmental. Yeah,
Yes.
and that could be a therapist, it could be a friend. And if you have friends that are in need of talking and you feel comfortable doing that, I think that's a great idea. And people appreciate it. And they want, because they're carrying around this idea that I'm a piece of dirt, basically, having somebody who listens and cares for them is really important. And knowing that you will keep their information confidential and won't be against them. It's hard for people to talk about it.
I think it's most important, especially if the other person accepts you as you are and
Yeah.
is willing to go forward.
Mhm. And to do it in small chunks is important, because what we don't want people is just throwing out everything. You want to take it in small chunks and be able to listen to them in that way.
So we're about out of time here.
Okay. So thank you all for your questions and comments. And we'll close with some worship.
Before we close, Cece, I just want to thank you for the wealth of information that you've given and so many examples of the way you work with moral injury. Is there any way that we can support you? I just want you to get in a little plug if there's a way that our meeting, our individuals in our meeting can support you.
Okay, I'll think about that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the offer.
Okay, so let's go into a period of silence, please.
Before that, Feast, would you give us the name of your book again?
Okay, it's Help for Moral Injury Strategies and Interventions. And I should say that all the money for this goes to Quaker House. They get all the funds from this.
Great.